My name is Hannah. I was born just 5 minutes after my twin brother, Caleb. But to our parents, Sandra and Michael Brooks, those 5 minutes might as well have been a lifetime. As far back as I can remember, it was clear that my world would always orbit around Caleb's blinding spotlight. We lived in a small, tight-knit community in Asheville, North Carolina, where the air smelled of pine trees and summer barbecues. On the surface, we seemed like an ordinary middle-class family. My mother, Sandra, worked as a real estate agent, always impeccably dressed as if she were about to walk into a magazine photo shoot. My father, Michael, owned a hardware store on Main Street, spending most days elbow-deep in tools and dusty inventory. But once you spent any real time with us, it became obvious who the true centerpiece of our family was: Caleb. The favoritism started so subtly that it almost felt like it was normal. When Caleb and I were 5, Mom took us shopping for new school shoes. Caleb picked out a brand new pair of leather sneakers from the front display, proudly showing them off. I was handed a pair of scuffed shoes from the clearance rack with a price tag slashed in half. I still remember Mom waving off my hesitation, telling the cashier, "These will be fine. She just needs something basic." It was always like that. Caleb got the newest, shiniest, most expensive things. I got whatever was left over, discounted, or forgotten. On our 6th birthday, we had a small party in the backyard. When it was time to open gifts, Caleb unwrapped a brand new electric race car set, the kind every kid dreamed of. I received a second-hand stuffed bear, one ear flopping sadly. Everyone clapped and laughed as Caleb tore around the yard with his cars. I quietly clutched my bear, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. Holidays were no different. Every Christmas, Caleb's presents formed a towering mountain under the tree, gleaming with colorful wrapping and shiny bows. My gifts barely filled a corner, wrapped in reused, wrinkled paper. Even the birthday cakes were a one-sided decision. Every year, Mom would ask Caleb what flavor he wanted, and that was the end of the discussion. One year, I finally spoke up. "Mom, I really like chocolate cake." She barely paused before replying, "Caleb doesn't like chocolate, so we'll stick with vanilla." Those little moments, repeated again and again, wore down my hope like water carving stone. Even the way they listened to us was different. When Caleb spoke, both of my parents leaned in, nodding along as if each word he said was wisdom from heaven. When I spoke, their gazes wandered elsewhere, only snapping back when Caleb chimed in again. The photo frames lining the hallway told the same story: Caleb centered, beaming, holding some new prize, while I was often tucked into the edges of the picture, barely noticeable. At one parent-teacher conference, my second-grade teacher praised my short story project and suggested I join the advanced writing class. I beamed with pride, but Mom barely glanced at me before brushing it off. "It's nice that Hannah is doing okay. But Caleb, he's the pride of the Brooks family." It didn't take long for me to learn an important lesson: stay quiet, expect nothing, and maybe it'll hurt less. By the time we were 7, Caleb's schedule was bursting at the seams. Monday was soccer practice, Tuesday was drum lessons, Wednesday was art class, Thursday was karate, and Fridays were packed with drama rehearsals. His weekends were filled with tournaments and recitals, and every moment of success was celebrated like it was a national holiday. And me? Mom handed me a list of spelling drills and math problems with a short, cold instruction: "Hannah, you need to learn how to manage on your own. Don't be a burden." Most afternoons, I sat alone at the kitchen table, scratching away at worksheets while the old clock ticked loudly above my head. The house was empty, silent, and stretched wide with loneliness. No cheers, no spotlights. Just me, a pencil, and the hope that someday, someone might finally see me. I sat alone at the kitchen table, methodically working through my spelling drills, solving long division problems, and reading heavy library books stacked taller than my elbows. The only sounds were the scratch of my pencil and the distant hum of the old refrigerator. Meanwhile, Caleb would burst through the door each evening, fresh from another practice or event, his chest glittering with medals or ribbons. Mom would drop everything, gushing to Dad about every tiny detail as if Caleb had just come back from winning the Olympics. One afternoon, I finally had something to be proud of too, a perfect score on my spelling test. I carried it home like a fragile treasure, my heart racing with hope. When I handed it to Mom, she barely glanced at it before setting it on the counter without a word. That same evening, Caleb unveiled a colorful painting he'd made at art class, winning second place in some local contest. Dad immediately jumped up to snap photos, and Mom kissed Caleb's forehead, her eyes glistening like she was witnessing a miracle. I clutched my forgotten test paper and tucked it under my pillow that night, letting my silent tears soak the pages, hidden away from the world. When I turned 8, I discovered a love for writing short stories. My third-grade English teacher, Mrs. Jennings, noticed and encouraged me to join the local children's writing club at the Pack Memorial Library downtown. I raced home, the invitation clutched tightly in my hand, ready to burst with excitement. But when I showed it to Mom, she barely looked up from her phone. "Caleb barely has time for all his activities," she said coldly. "And you think you can just demand special treatment?" Before I could say anything, she tossed the invitation into the trash with a careless flick of her wrist. Later that week, she proudly announced that Caleb had been signed up for a new martial arts class. Some nights, I lay in bed staring at the stick-on glow-in-the-dark stars above my head. Caleb had a full constellation, meticulously arranged and bright. Mine were just a few leftover stickers slapped up in a random pattern. I told myself, if I just try harder, they'll notice me too. But over time, even that fragile hope withered. Everything came crashing down one cold winter night. I woke up thirsty and tiptoed downstairs to grab a glass of water. The lights from the living room spilled faintly into the hallway. As I moved closer, I heard hushed voices. Curiosity pulled me forward until I crouched behind the wall, heart pounding. "Michael," Mom said, her voice thick with exhaustion, "do you ever wonder if we made a mistake?" "What do you mean?" Dad replied, sounding worn down. "I mean," she sighed, "we should have just had one child. Caleb's enough. He's smart, talented, destined for great things. And Hannah," Dad said quietly. "She just exists," Mom said, almost bitterly. "Life would be simpler without her." There was a pause, then Dad muttered, "You're probably right." I stood there, the glass trembling in my hand, feeling the freezing winter air pierce straight through my chest. I stumbled back upstairs, not caring how loud my steps sounded, not caring if the glass shattered in my hand. That night, I buried myself under the covers, biting my lip until it bled to keep from sobbing out loud. Every word I overheard sliced deeper than the last, cutting away whatever hope I'd still been clinging to. The next morning at breakfast, I sat stone-faced as Mom handed Caleb a brand new, bright red ski jacket, perfect for the upcoming winter trip. For me, a pair of old mittens, slightly stained and smelling faintly of last year's pine needles. Caleb whooped in delight, hugging Mom and spinning around the kitchen. I offered a hollow smile, tucking the mittens into my jacket pocket along with every unspoken hurt. From that day forward, I stopped asking for anything. I stopped trying to earn their love or attention. I turned inward and poured everything I had into my schoolwork, the only place where I felt I could still matter, even if only to myself. At night, I started keeping a little journal under my mattress. In it, I wrote everything I couldn't say out loud, the loneliness, the small victories no one saw, the dreams I wasn't brave enough to chase yet. I didn't know if those pages would save me, but writing kept my heart from freezing over completely. Slowly, I stopped looking at my parents with longing. I wrapped up every yearning for fairness, love, and recognition into a small, tight knot deep inside me, a letter I would never send. Instead, I built a fortress with books, knowledge, and quiet strength. While other kids spent afternoons at soccer fields or sleepovers, I disappeared into the library, tucked between rows of thick encyclopedias and history books, learning how to build a future far away from the empty spaces of my childhood home. While most kids spent their afternoons at sports or hanging out at the park, I found my sanctuary in the school library. Between the worn wooden shelves and the hum of the fluorescent lights, I drilled advanced math problems, dissected complex reading passages, and pored over every detail in history textbooks. I didn't study for attention. I studied to prove that even if no one at home ever looked my way, I could still shine. On my own. My 8th grade English teacher, Mrs. Simmons, was the first to truly notice the shift. One morning, after we'd completed a rigorous reading comprehension exam, she motioned me over to her desk. "Hannah," she said, her smile warm and steady, "have you ever thought about entering the state essay competition? Your test was one of the best I've seen." I nodded, a quiet joy blooming in my chest. Not because I needed someone to be proud of me, but because for the first time, I felt like I was on a path of my own choosing. Meanwhile, Caleb had begun to notice. Every time a teacher praised me in class, his shoulders stiffened. He started slamming his notebook shut or sighing loudly, as if to signal his disapproval to the whole room. After Mrs. Simmons praised my writing during a school assembly, Caleb slammed his textbook on his desk so hard that the entire auditorium turned to stare. That night, I overheard him in the kitchen, grumbling to Mom. "All the teachers are obsessed with Hannah," he snapped. "I do just as well, but they only ever talk about her." Mom didn't even blink. She stirred her tea and muttered flatly, "Caleb, don't take it personally. People tend to pity the less fortunate ones." I should have been crushed by that line. But instead, I felt a dry, quiet laugh bubble in my throat. I didn't need pity. I had talent. And every day I was proving it. My grades skyrocketed. My name appeared on the honor roll month after month. I was invited to serve as a student assistant in multiple subjects. I joined the debate team, the academic league, and even took home a ribbon from the county science fair. Every time the principal called my name to the stage, I stood tall beneath the gymnasium lights. And every time, Caleb sat in the audience, his expression darker than the last. Eventually, he started spreading whispers around school. He claimed teachers were biased in my favor, that the administration bent over backward for me. I heard him once in the hallway telling his friends I was just a teacher's pet and a robot who memorized everything like a parrot. But I didn't defend myself. I let the facts speak louder. My GPA, my awards, the letters of recommendation I'd quietly collected, and the scholarship interview invites from top universities around the country. One evening, as I sat at my desk filling out college scholarship applications under the soft glow of my lamp, I heard Mom and Dad talking in the living room. "I think Caleb's starting to feel the pressure," Mom whispered. "He's never had to compete within our own family before." "Hannah's just overcompensating," Dad replied. "Caleb is still our real hope." I froze, pen paused mid-sentence. I didn't cry this time. I didn't even feel hurt. Just resolute. If they couldn't see me now, they never would. I didn't need to win their love anymore. The next morning, I submitted my application for the school's elite academic advancement program, a program Caleb didn't even meet the qualifications for. A week later, I held the acceptance letter in my hands. As I traced the words with my fingertips, I knew something had shifted. This was mine. Not out of spite, not to compete, but because I had earned it. That Sunday, while organizing old books on the family's living room shelf, I stumbled upon an old photo album wedged between two dusty encyclopedias. The leather cover was cracked, and the pages inside had turned yellow with time. I flipped it open, not knowing that what I was about to find would change everything. I opened the album gently, brushing my fingers across the faded photographs, faces I didn't recognize, frozen smiles, a warmth that felt strangely familiar despite the years. Each page carried a quiet mystery. But then, one image stopped me cold. My mother, young, without her usual armor of lipstick and polished jewelry, stood between an elderly couple with kind, time-worn faces. Her hands were clasped in theirs, her expression open, almost innocent. Below the photo, in shaky cursive, were the words, "Sandra with Mom and Dad, 1992. A strange pressure filled my chest. I flipped forward, and there it was, a letter, folded tightly and yellowed at the edges. The paper smelled faintly musty, like it had been waiting for someone to find it. I unfolded it slowly, the scrolled handwriting delicate but legible. "Dear daughter, we hope to see you and the children again soon. Please don't shut us out forever. Our love has never left." I stared at the words, my heart pounding louder than the ticking wall clock. All my life, I'd assumed my mother's parents had passed away before I was born. She never spoke of them. And the one time I asked, she simply said, "They're not part of our lives anymore," her tone clipped and final. But now, everything I thought I knew was unraveling. That night, while Mom and Caleb sat on the couch watching one of their favorite drama shows, I snuck into Mom's home office. My fingers trembled as I pulled open the bottom drawer of her old filing cabinet. Beneath a stack of crumpled receipts and manila folders was a worn black address book. Dozens of names were crossed out inside, but one stood out. "Do not contact William and June Brooks." The name was circled in red ink. My heart slammed against my ribs. I grabbed a pencil from the desk and scribbled the address onto the back of a scratch paper from my math notebook. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew I had to go. The next day after school, I told Mom I had a group project to work on. Instead of heading to the library, I hopped on bus 7, which wound through the older streets on the edge of town, quiet neighborhoods where the paint on the homes had long since faded and the sidewalks buckled with time. House number 42 matched the address. A small white house sat behind a faded green picket fence. Wild daisies swayed in the front garden like they'd never stopped blooming. I stepped up to the porch and knocked, my hand trembling. The door creaked open, and an elderly woman with silver hair pinned neatly back stared at me as if she'd seen a ghost. Behind her, an older man leaned on the doorframe, his eyes narrowing with curiosity and disbelief. "Who are you?" she asked softly, her voice shaking. I swallowed, summoning every ounce of courage. "I'm Hannah Brooks, Sandra's daughter." They both froze. The woman's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes instantly filling with tears. The man stepped forward, his hand reaching for mine. "Oh my God," he whispered. "June, look, she looks just like Sandra did at her age." They pulled me inside. Their home was humble but filled with warmth, framed photos on every wall, the scent of apple pie drifting from the kitchen, the cushions worn from years of use, but plumped with care. We sat on the floral couch in the living room, and for the first time in years, I felt safe. Like I wasn't a mistake. Like I belonged. They told me stories about my mother's childhood, how smart she was, how she dreamed big, how she used to laugh easily. And then, gently, I asked the question that had been burning inside me. Why had she shut them out? June sighed, her eyes heavy with sorrow. "Your mom, she thought being poor was shameful. She wanted a life where no one knew where she came from. So she left. But we never stopped loving her. Or you." William took my hand, his grip rough but steady. "Sweetheart, no matter what your mom decided, we've always had room in our hearts for you." Tears streamed down my face, but for once, they weren't from sadness. They were from the simple, overwhelming feeling of being wanted. Before I left, June tucked a bag of warm cookies into my hands. "Whenever you need a place to feel like home," she said, her voice cracking, "our door is always open." I stepped outside into the golden glow of late afternoon. A breeze lifted my hair, like the world itself was whispering, "You're not alone anymore." Graduation day arrived on a warm June morning. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window as I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of my navy blue gown. A bittersweet ache settled in my chest. No one at home had asked if I was ready. No one helped with my cap or took photos before I left. But I promised myself, today would be mine. I had fought too hard, survived too much, to let this moment pass unnoticed, at least by me. The ceremony was held in the high school gymnasium, decked out with streamers and folding chairs. When the principal stepped up to the podium and called my name as valedictorian, the room erupted into applause. I walked across the stage slowly, heart pounding. I accepted my honors diploma, the spotlight catching the tears in my eyes. As I turned to face the crowd, I scanned the rows of faces, searching for mine. My mother sat in the front row, arms crossed, her face barely lifted. Caleb sat beside her, whispering something that made them both snicker. It was as if the entire event was a mild inconvenience between errands. When Caleb's name was called later, for a basic certificate of completion, Mom suddenly came to life. "Caleb, look up here, baby," she shouted, waving excitedly like he'd just been accepted to Harvard. I stood at the edge of the stage, diploma pressed against my chest, watching her beam with pride, not for me, but for the son who did just enough to graduate. After the ceremony, families gathered on the school lawn for pictures. Parents clutched their children, laughing and crying. I stood stiffly to the side while Mom snapped photo after photo of Caleb, positioning his gown and tossing compliments like confetti. My valedictorian diploma stayed tucked under my arm, still unacknowledged. That evening, we had a quiet dinner at home. I had barely touched my food when Mom suddenly clapped her hands together, grinning like she'd been waiting all day to make her announcement. "Guess what?" she said, practically bouncing. "We're going to Hawaii to celebrate." My fork paused midair. A spark of hope flickered in my chest. "Just maybe. Just the three of us," Mom continued brightly. "Your dad, me, and Caleb." My heart sank. "And you, Hannah," she added with a hollow smile, "you'll stay home to watch the house. Plus, don't you have your job at the cafe this summer?" Caleb burst into laughter, slapping the table. "Don't worry, sis. I'll send you tons of pictures. Ocean views, umbrella drinks, 5-star buffets. You'll feel like you're right there with us." I sat there, my chopsticks slipping from my fingers onto the plate. My heart felt numb. "You understand, right?" Mom asked, her tone too sweet, too rehearsed, like all she needed was my nod to enjoy the trip guilt-free. I swallowed hard. "Yes," I said softly. "I understand." That night, I watched from my bedroom window as they packed their brand new matching luggage sets. I stared at the twinkling summer stars and wondered what I'd ever expected: a thank you, a hug, a seat on the plane. Those things had never been mine. And they never would be. The next morning, I leaned against the doorframe as the taxi pulled up. Caleb stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses and a designer jumpsuit, dragging his suitcase with a theatrical flair. He turned back to wave, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Don't let your little waitress job kill your dreams, Hannah," he called. The car door slammed shut, and the taxi disappeared down the road, carrying their laughter and indifference with it. I closed the front door gently behind me, slid down to the floor, and for the first time in a long while, I cried. But the tears weren't just about being left behind. They were a cleansing, washing away every foolish hope I'd ever clung to when it came to that family. When they finally stopped, I stood, wiped my face, and picked up my phone. I scrolled to the name I'd been thinking about all night and hit dial. "Grandma?" I said, my voice trembling but strong. June's voice answered right away, gentle and certain. "Of course, sweetheart. We've been waiting for you." "Oh, of course, sweetheart. We're always waiting for you." Grandma June's voice wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I hung up, grabbed the small overnight bag I'd packed the night before, and stepped outside, locking the door to a house that had never truly felt like home. I walked away from years of cold glances, quiet dinners, and being invisible. I was ready for something new. And this time, I wasn't looking back. When I arrived at the little white house on Sycamore Street, William and June were already standing on the porch. Their faces lit up the moment they saw me, like they were welcoming someone important, not out of duty, but love. June wrapped me in a hug so firm and soft I felt the ache in my chest begin to dissolve. William gently patted my back, and in that simple touch, years of silent wounds began to heal. Inside, the house smelled like toasted bread and cinnamon. On the wall above the dining table hung a homemade paper banner that read, "Congratulations, sweet Hannah." Just those 4 words. But they made my heart swell in a way I'd never experienced before. Lunch was already waiting. Grilled chicken, creamy potato salad, and the crispy apple pie June had promised on my last visit. As we ate, they asked about graduation, my classes, my future plans, not because they were checking boxes, but because they truly cared. After lunch, William stood up and disappeared into the back room, returning with a small silver-wrapped box. "We've been waiting to give you this," he said, eyes shining behind his glasses. "You've worked so hard. You deserve something special." I opened it slowly, my hands trembling. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a gleaming car key. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I blinked at them. "Is this real?" June nodded, her voice gentle. "We've thought about this for a long time. You're starting a new chapter. You should do it with confidence." I ran outside, heart thudding, and there it was in the driveway, a brand new silver Lexus, sparkling in the late afternoon sun. I stood there, hands over my mouth, eyes brimming with tears. I couldn't even finish the sentence. William chuckled. "When your mother left years ago, we didn't know what to do with our savings. So we invested a little in a few tech stocks, thinking maybe they'd help someday." He smiled. "Turns out, they did pretty well. But we never touched the money, not for vacations, not for upgrades. We wanted to save it for something that truly mattered." I threw my arms around both of them, unable to hold back the tears. For the first time in my life, I was being given something just for me, no strings, no conditions, just love. Later, as we sat in the living room, William pulled out a pale blue envelope. "Remember when you mentioned Columbia University?" My breath caught in my throat. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a copy of my acceptance letter, along with confirmation of a full-ride scholarship for all 4 years. Tuition, housing, everything covered. I was stunned. All those late nights studying, every silent tear I'd cried alone in my room, every bit of it had led here. June reached for my hand. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore, Hannah. You've always been enough." That evening, I sat on their front porch, the car key resting in my palm, watching the purple and gold hues of the sunset stretch across the sky. For the first time, I wasn't a forgotten daughter or a shadow of my brother. I was someone. I had a future. And I had a family who truly saw me. When they returned from Hawaii, I was already sitting on the front bench, a glass of iced tea in hand, the Lexus gleaming beside me in the driveway. I didn't rush inside. I wanted to witness it, the exact moment when the illusion they lived in shattered into pieces. The taxi pulled into the driveway. Mom stepped out first, her hair perfectly curled, sunglasses perched high on her nose. The summer sun was blazing, casting sharp shadows across the front yard. Mom stepped out of the taxi first, squinting and shielding her eyes like the light itself offended her. Her gaze swept lazily across the driveway until it landed on the new silver Lexus. She stopped cold, like someone had knocked the air right out of her lungs. Caleb followed a step behind, dragging his sleek black Gucci suitcase across the concrete with dramatic flair. When his eyes met the car, he stumbled slightly, blinking hard. "What?" he muttered. "What is this?" Mom looked from the Lexus to me, her voice cracking. "Whose car is that?" Dad was the last to step out. He slowly removed his sunglasses, his eyes widening in disbelief. I stood up from the porch bench, casually twirling the car key around my finger as if I'd been doing it my whole life. "Welcome home," I said evenly. "By the way, this is my graduation gift. From Grandma June and Grandpa William." The air seemed to freeze. For years, they hadn't asked a single question about my grandparents, hadn't so much as acknowledged their existence. But now, the greed in their eyes was impossible to miss. "They're still alive?" Mom asked, stunned. Not only alive, I said, smiling, but doing far better than you ever imagined. Caleb looked around wildly, like he hoped this scene might vanish if he blinked hard enough. But the Lexus gleamed stubbornly under the golden afternoon sun, unbothered by their discomfort. Mom recovered first. She stepped forward, linking her arm through Caleb's with a syrupy, sweet smile. Hannah, she said brightly, you know Caleb is starting college soon. He really needs a good car. This one would be perfect for him. I raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting I give him my car? Exactly, Dad added, his voice sharper now. You work at a coffee shop. You don't need a luxury car. Caleb has internships coming up, college interviews. He needs to make an impression. Caleb stood silently, but his eyes were glued to the Lexus like he was already envisioning it parked outside his dorm. I let out a clear, unapologetic laugh. It echoed through the stillness like a sudden breeze. You know, I said, walking toward the car, it's actually hilarious. You ignored me, dismissed me, made me feel like I didn't belong. And now that I have something, anything, you're ready to snatch it away without shame. Dad stepped forward, his face flushed. If you refuse to share, don't expect to stay in this house. I looked at him evenly. Oh, I don't plan to. I popped the trunk of the Lexus, revealing 2 neatly packed suitcases. Mom gasped, and Caleb muttered something under his breath. I've been ready for this for a long time, I said firmly. This house, this life you built without me? I don't need it anymore. I closed the trunk, opened the driver's side door, and looked over my shoulder. And one more thing, I added, my voice calm and deliberate. I got into Columbia University. Full scholarship. That line hit harder than anything else I'd said. Mom staggered slightly, gripping the taxi door. Caleb clutched the strap of his designer backpack like it might slip away. Without waiting for a response, I slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and rolled down the window. Have a wonderful summer, I said, cool and quiet. While I start my new life. I pressed the gas. The Lexus glided smoothly down the road, and I didn't look back, not once. Their shocked, regretful faces disappeared in the rearview mirror, where they belonged. That summer, I lived with William and June in their small white house, surrounded by blooming wild daisies. Every morning, I woke to the sound of Grandpa reading the paper and the scent of Grandma's fresh biscuits in the oven. Peace settled into me like sunlight through the window. They never asked about my parents. They never asked me to explain the pain. They just loved me. And, for the first time in my life, I didn't have to earn it. As the fall semester at Columbia approached, William and June surprised me with one last gift, something that left me completely speechless. They had found me a small, cozy apartment just 10 minutes from campus. It sat on the 3rd floor of a quiet, ivy-covered brick building on the Upper West Side. The hardwood floors gleamed in the afternoon light, wide windows stretched across the living room, and there was even a little balcony just big enough for a reading chair and a row of flower pots. You need a space of your own to start this new chapter, Grandpa said, pressing the keys into my palm. I hugged them both tightly, my tears falling freely this time, not from pain, but from overwhelming gratitude. For once, I didn't have to prove anything to be loved. This was home not because of the walls, but because of the hearts that had made it possible. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. I picked up a part-time job at a small cafe just a few blocks from campus. The pace was fast, the coffee strong, and the air always buzzing with energy. I loved the constant chatter, the messy espresso machines, and the stories that poured out of people in the early morning rush. In class, I began to blossom. I met students who didn't know a thing about my past, and for once, that was exactly what I wanted. There was Emma, a sociology major who laughed like wind chimes in a breeze, and Daniel, an economics major who lingered after lectures to debate ideas and share study tips. They didn't ask about my family. They didn't press. They simply accepted me as I was, a determined 18-year-old who had fought hard to be there. And I loved them for it. My life quickly filled with new experiences. Long nights hunched over textbooks, heated discussions in seminar rooms, and the busy blur of cafe shifts on weekends. For the first time in my life, I tasted real freedom, not just from my old house, but from the invisible weight of judgment and comparison. But peace doesn't always last without interruption. One quiet September afternoon, I sat curled on my balcony with a book in my lap, sunlight warming my shoulders. My phone buzzed. I glanced down, and there it was, a name I hadn't seen in months. Mom. I let it ring until it stopped. Then I declined the next one. And the next. Soon, messages poured in. Hannah, we miss you. Family is always family. You can't stay mad forever. Your grandparents won't be around forever either. Think about your future. But I already had. That's what they didn't understand. I knew exactly why the messages came. Word had gotten back to them about the car, the apartment, the scholarship. The very same people who once looked down on my grandparents were now desperate to tie themselves back to me. A few days later, while I was pulling espresso shots behind the cafe counter, I looked up and saw them, Mom and Dad, standing just outside the window. Caleb was with them, arms folded across his chest, face blank and cold. I turned away and kept working as if they were strangers. Because in truth, that's all they had ever been. That night, I blocked their numbers. I unfollowed them on every platform. I deleted old emails. That chapter was closed, and I had no interest in reopening it just because they had something to gain now. Later, I sat on my balcony, the streetlights glowing warm and soft below. I hugged a throw pillow close and breathed in the calm that filled every corner of my life. I was no longer chasing approval or clinging to scraps of affection. At Columbia, my days flew by. I immersed myself in advanced coursework, volunteered for research, and even began drafting a plan for a community tutoring program for underserved youth. One afternoon, as I scribbled notes in the library, Daniel approached carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you're about to save the world," he said, grinning as he slid 1 cup in front of me. I laughed, freely, fully. "1 page at a time," I replied. I truly laughed, deeply, freely, feeling for the first time what it meant to share my dreams without fear of being dismissed or belittled. Daniel and I grew close in a way that felt natural, grounded in something I had never seen growing up: mutual respect. He listened to my stories with quiet patience, never interrupting, never pitying. Just listening. And somehow, that felt like the purest form of love. One crisp autumn evening, we sat side by side on the balcony of my apartment. The city lights shimmered below us like distant stars. Daniel turned to me, his gaze steady. "Hannah," he said softly, "you know something? You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." I looked at him, my heart no longer heavy, no longer guarded. For the first time in years, I let myself believe it. "I used to think I needed recognition to exist," I said, my voice calm. "But now I realize I just need to be myself." He reached out and took my hand. His grasp was warm, his silence full of meaning. When winter arrived, I received an internship offer from a major nonprofit that supports underserved students. It was the kind of opportunity one had dreamed about during long, lonely nights at my old house, wondering if the world ever made room for people like me, people who had to fight to be seen. I called my grandparents the moment I got the news. Over the phone, June's voice broke with pride. "My sweet girl did it," she whispered. And not to please anyone else, but because her own heart led the way. During winter break, I visited them. We decorated the Christmas tree, baked gingerbread cookies, and shared stories from our pasts. There were no grand gestures or expensive gifts. Just love, laughter, and hugs that felt like home. One afternoon, while helping June sort through an old chest of family photos, I came across a picture from years ago, a group shot of my old family. In it, I was standing on the far edge, half-shadowed, my smile stiff and small. I stared at it for a moment before gently placing it back in the box. "I don't need them anymore," I said softly. June reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. Tears shimmered in her eyes. A real family, she said, is where you're loved for who you are without needing to earn it. When spring arrived, I stood in front of the mirror wearing my graduation robe from Columbia's honors program. As I looked at my reflection, I saw someone I barely recognized, but in the best possible way. Gone was the quiet, overlooked girl who once begged for scraps of affection. Standing in her place was a young woman full of confidence, strength, and grace. Outside my window, new buds had begun to bloom. I smiled, knowing they were nature's quiet reminder. Every ending holds the seed of a beginning. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for once I wasn't afraid. With love behind me, opportunity before me, and strength within me, I stepped forward. Steady, proud, free. From a forgotten daughter to a woman who had built a life on her own terms, I had become more than anyone ever expected. Not through bitterness, but through purpose. My name is Hannah Brooks, and this is my story. Not about who left me behind, but how I found myself. I didn't share my story to gain sympathy. I shared it because I know I'm not alone. Maybe you felt like I did, overlooked, unappreciated, or dismissed by the very people who should have lifted you up. If so, I want you to know something. You're not invisible. Your worth isn't determined by who claps for you, who shows up, or who stays silent when you shine. It's determined by the strength you carry, even when no one is watching. If my journey moved you, if you saw a part of yourself in my quiet fight to be seen, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, share your story, your struggles, or just a few kind words. I'll be reading everyone. Your support means more to me than you could ever know. And if I can offer one piece of advice from everything I've been through, it's this. Don't wait for permission to live your life. You don't need someone else's recognition to pursue your dreams, set boundaries, or walk away from people who only show up when it benefits them. Build a life that reflects who you are, not who they told you to be. I found my freedom in the quiet spaces, in the library corners, the cafe shifts, the soft moments with my grandparents, and in the steady love I never had to earn. You can find yours too. Start with one decision. Believe that you are enough. Now it's your turn. Speak up. Be seen. Be heard. And if no one has told you this today, let me be the first. I'm proud of you. Hannah Brooks.